Good afternoon and welcome to the News Roundup for Tuesday, November 4th, 2025. It's day 35 of the federal government shutdown, and I'm Bill Thomas, and here's what's happening right now. America losing a political giant as former two-term Vice President Dick Cheney passes away at the age of 84. The Department of Transportation warning that our nation might be forced to shut down airspace in certain portions of the country if the government shutdown lasts much longer. And Communist China throwing down the gauntlet, demanding that our country avoids crossing a number of highly sensitive red line issues if we want our recently negotiated trade deal to remain intact. Also, the police force in a major American city rolling the dice and introducing a fleet of brand new bulletproof cyber trucks. I want one of those. And the skinniest townhouse in New York City has just hit the open market, and we'll tell you all about this legendary crib, which might not be suitable for NBA players. All this and a bunch more coming up right now on the Big Roundup. We have a great deal to get to today, and we begin with a bit of somber news for our nation. Following a long and remarkable career in politics, former Vice President Dick Cheney died on Monday night at the age of 84. His family says his death was the result of a combination of pneumonia and heart disease. And in case you're not aware, Cheney spent literally decades in public service by acting at one time as our nation's defense secretary under President George H.W. Bush, White House Chief of Staff under President Gerald Ford, and for many years as his home state of Wyoming's lone congressman. Perhaps more importantly, Cheney served as a two-term vice president under George W. Bush, becoming the administration's leading advocate for our country's decades-long war on terror, and that following the devastating 9/11 attacks. However, in recent years, the former VP has largely fallen out of favor with the modern Republican Party because he stood behind his daughter, former Wyoming Congresswoman Liz Cheney, who became a vocal critic of President Trump. Throughout his lifetime, the former VP endured a number of cardiovascular problems. He survived 5 heart attacks before eventually receiving a heart transplant, and that was back in 2012. Cheney's family says that his wife, daughters, and other loved ones were with him when he crossed over, that he was a good man who taught them all to love our country, and that he also valued honor, courage, and fly fishing. Former President George W. Bush calls Cheney's death a loss for our nation, saying that he'll be long remembered as an American patriot who brought integrity to every position he ever held. Former President Bill Clinton paid his respects to Cheney, saying that even though they often disagreed, Cheney was always guided by a deep belief that what he was doing was, in fact, right for America. Final thought, and this is the News Roundup Lowdown. The world has lost a decades-long Washington insider. A gentleman who served his country, served it well, and by all accounts is recognized as the one man who kind of redefined the role of Vice President of the United States. His full and complete resume would take hours to break down, but clearly Mr. Cheney was well educated, understood how Washington worked, was a faithful ally to everyone he served with or under, and was in fact a great American. Now, interesting to note that unlike former vice presidents such as Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, even Al Gore, and others, in his role as vice president, Dick Cheney was never mapping out a future strategy which would put him on his path to the presidency once W's second term had concluded. He simply focused on the job at hand, which was centered upon serving the President of the United States. Dick Cheney was not a healthy man, and the only individual I've ever known of who lived through 5 heart attacks, a heart transplant as well, but still got up out of bed every day and continued to fight the good fight. Flags at the White House are at half-staff today in honor of former Vice President Dick Cheney. Now, your thoughts and comments on the passing of our nation's 46th Vice President. Reach out to us at newsroundupwithbill@gmail.com. And producer Davey, I hope folks are really moved by what just happened. We all knew Dick Cheney was getting older and he wasn't healthy, but this still comes as a bit of a shock. And what are folks saying?
Oh, yeah, Bill. People are definitely moved. And we start with Mrs. Williams in Rifle, Colorado.
Madam Williams, what do you think?
She says, Dick Cheney was a great American patriot who dedicated his life to our nation. We should be eternally grateful, and my condolences go out to his family and friends.
Absolutely. His colleagues in Washington and his colleagues in Wyoming as well. You know, the funny thing about Dick Cheney, I never got the feeling that Kamala Harris was a big fan of her boss, President Biden. But in my belly, I always knew that Dick Cheney, even though he was W's elder, I knew that he always stood in full support of the President of the United States, George W. Bush. Dick Cheney, in my estimation, did the best he could and fought for the very survival of the country he served very well and for a good chunk of time. All right, David, who else you got?
Okay, Bill, we have Jonathan checking in with us from Kansas City, Missouri.
Hello, John. What do you think?
He says, rest in peace, Mr. Cheney, and thank you on behalf of a grateful nation.
Yeah, you got to thank people for their service. You thank police officers when you see them on the street. Thank them for serving your city. Thank our fellow service members. Thank them for their service. And thank our Vice President of the United States for a very well and long and distinguished career. All right, change things up just a bit now and look to the skies for a grim warning from the Transportation Department regarding the government shutdown's dreadful impact on our nation's troubled aviation system. Yeah, another kick in the teeth. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy now revealing that if the Democrats choose to keep our government closed much longer, his agency might actually be forced to shut down certain portions of our country's airspace just to keep the bulk of the system up and running effectively. Hey, America, do me a favor. Please send a note to a guy called Chuck Schumer. Now, Duffy says that in less than a week from right now, there won't be enough air traffic controllers remaining on the job to safely manage all of the aircraft flying in the skies above our country. Well, we can always use skateboards or pogo sticks to move about the country. Davey, are you a skateboard guy or pogo stick kind of guy?
Oh, Bill, without a doubt, a pogo stick every day of the week.
Yeah, they are kind of fun. They're kind of lunky when you're taking them down the freeway. You kind of get in people's way. It's not exactly safe, but it sure is fun. He also says that if nothing changes between now and then, travelers can expect to see massive flight delays, a rapidly growing number of cancellations, and basically mass chaos in our airports. Well, like the commercial says, go Greyhound and leave the driving to them. Hop a bus. According to the Federal Aviation Administration, our pals at the FAA, right now, nearly half of all air traffic control facilities, they face wretched staffing shortages. They also say that due to the shutdown, almost 13,000 air traffic controllers are currently working without pay. In which case, Davey, correct me if I'm wrong, they're not working. They're kind of forced volunteering. Is that right?
That's right, Bill. You got that one right.
As Duffy points out, these flight controllers, they are hard-working Americans with bills to pay. And the Democrat-led shutdown, it's causing them to make some very difficult decisions concerning how they put food on the table for their families or gas into their vehicles. Now, think about it. It's kind of a double whammy. The Democrat shutdown, that means you got to work without pay, and you can try to get SNAP benefits, but as we all know, those have been canceled as well. Thank you, Democrats. It is kind of the perfect crime. Final thought, this is the News Roundup Lowdown. You know, the Democrat shutdown now in its second month, it's taken hold. It's getting worse every day. And now more disturbing aviation-related news, which is all tied to the shutdown. Our nation's Department of Transportation making clear that as soon as next week, they may have to shut down portions of our country's airspace, and all to ensure everyone's safety. It's all abundantly basic, and due to the shutdown, there is a shortage of air traffic controllers. And so, you know, those controllers, these jobs they have are absolutely essential to aviation safety. You need well-trained, highly educated men and women in those control towers to maintain aircraft separation, coordinate safely arrivals and departures, and even work with pilots who are repositioning their aircraft from one location to another while still on the ground at the airport. So they're called ground controllers in the tower. You know, if those air traffic control facilities, if they're short-staffed, the safety of the flight crew and their passengers absolutely could be greatly compromised, and nothing can replace safety. Well, you can't hire temps for these kind of jobs. They're far too specialized. You can't farm out the work to another country. And AI, it's in absolutely no position, not yet anyway, to assume the role of air traffic control. Flight delays, cancellations, they're already unbearable. They're going to get worse. And if some of our country's airspace closes, you know, don't even think about flying to Aunt Jenny and Uncle Todd's house for Thanksgiving. Well, there goes the holiday. All right, tell us what you're thinking. You'll catch us at newsroundupwithbill@gmail.com. Davey, the big holiday is coming up. Aviation's a bit of a mess. What are folks thinking?
Okay, Bill, we have Manfred checking in with us from Decatur, Illinois.
The second Manfred I've ever come across. Many years ago, the Manfred Man Light Band. Dave, remember that, right?
Oh, yeah. Isn't that Blinded by the Light?
That is Blinded by the Light and Doo-Wah Diddy and all the rest. But this is the new and improved Manfred. And Manfred, what's on your mind, sir?
Well, this Manfred says the Dems have been ruining our country for decades. Now they're destroying our air travel, too, and holding our nation hostage with their demands. Yeah. Just like terrorists.
Yes, it's so basic as well. The Democrats simply come to the table. You got to get that funding bill. You got to reopen the government, get aviation back on track, get SNAP benefits back on track as well, reopen the government, get the country moving once again. You can't shut down aviation, particularly just in front of Thanksgiving. Hey, Manfred, appreciate you checking in. Davey, who's up next?
Okay, Bill, we have a different view from Ada in Bloomington, Indiana.
Hello, Ada.
She says if the Republicans were only willing to play fair and negotiate, the government would get funded immediately. Then all of these alleged airport problems would disappear with the snap of a finger.
Well, first off, they're not alleged problems. They are very sincere problems, very serious problems. Talk to anybody who's tried to travel recently. Our aviation system in general has always been problem-plagued with cancellations and delays and all the rest, but this is just making things exponentially worse. And please, don't blame the Republicans. Clearly, this is the Democrat shutdown. On this program, even yesterday, we talked about the fine gentleman from Pennsylvania, Senator John Fetterman, who said the Democrats have to own this shutdown. And now airspace in certain portions of the country, it's going to get shut down, most likely next week. And by the way, the last time I can recall the federal government shutting down our nation's airspace, you realize how serious this is? This was back on 9/11 following the terror attacks. Now, look, this is all very unnecessary. It's all the result of the Democrat shutdown, Ada, not the Republican shutdown, and it's turning into more than just an inconvenience. Honestly, this is a life and death safety issue. All right, switch things up just a bit now, turning our attention to China's provocative warning to the U.S. You're warning us, which basically demands that we completely refrain from bringing up a number of hot-button topics if we want to continue doing business with the communist regime. Well, we don't really want to, but we sort of kind of have to. We're at that point in life. The Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, declaring that Beijing has now established 4 distinct red lines which Americans must avoid crossing if we want our recently brokered trade deal to continue as negotiated. They include breaching the subjects of Taiwan, democracy and human rights, China's political system, and the CCP's right to development. China's ambassador to the U.S. says his nation hopes that the U.S. will respect their wishes, not cause any trouble, and avoid crossing any lines in any way. He also says that maintaining good relations between our two countries, it's going to require both sides to respect each other's fundamental concerns. Now, editor's note. Color me the editor. You know, it would also help if China would stop pouring money into Russia's economy, which clearly funds Russia's war machine. Just a reminder, China, people are dying in Russia and Ukraine. He also says that right now the top priority should be to follow up on the recent trade agreement which was reached between President Trump and China's leader Xi Jinping. The ambassador goes on to warn, however, that if any conflicts erupt between our two nations over tariffs, technology, or something else altogether, all of our previous efforts to forge closer business ties will lead to nothing more than a dead end. Hey, look, if there's a dead end, we'll be the ones to close the road, not them. And final thoughts, this is the News Roundup Lowdown. You know, when you get pulled over by somebody in law enforcement for going just a pinch over the speed limit, you don't dictate to the officer how the stop is going to pan out. You do what's necessary. Provide your license, insurance, registration. You kind of keep your mouth zipped up and you hope for the best. Likewise, when the U.S. agrees to do business with China, it would be most appropriate for that nation to say, please, thank you. I hope we can do more business with each other down the road in just a bit. And after that, keep quiet. Also, a nation which isn't even deserving of having a trade deal with us, China, because they're a communist country which openly participates in human rights abuses, religious suppression, perpetual surveillance, and more. They're showing some real ugly table manners right now by telling us, the U.S., how it's all going to pan out. Well, the U.S. in general and the Trump administration in particular doesn't need to be schooled on any red lines we shouldn't cross, red lines or any other color lines. With particular regard to China's thoughts on Taiwan, the CCP saying they view Taiwan as lost territory that must be brought under their control someday and by force if necessary. President Trump, well, he thinks otherwise, and he's made it abundantly clear that while he's in the White House, it wouldn't be wise for China to move on their island nation neighbor. We all know how that's going to pan out. Your thoughts on China telling us what to do and say, I don't like it, but what say you? Chime in right now. We're at newsroundupwithbill@gmail.com. Davey, what do you got for us?
Okay, Bill, George from Tuscaloosa, Alabama.
George, what's on your mind, sir?
He says, enough is enough. We should cross every single one of those communist red lines and explain to China what they can do with their threats.
Yeah, very, very well said. Very cogent thought. But look, on the other hand, you got to kind of be honest. We need China. China needs us. It's a big trade situation. We got to keep things friendly, or at least friendly-ish. However, it is painful to be doing so much business with a communist country, which not only controls their entire population, now they're also trying to control us. That's not going to happen. But I'll tell you, even worse, they are close personal pals with Russia. They're very close with our pals in Russia. They're helping to fund Russia's war against Ukraine. And we've said it before, that's just pure evil. Now, some additional headlines we are keeping a very close watch on here in the News Roundup newsroom. And first up, a brand new poll showing that a vast majority of Americans say they're now spending more money on both groceries and their utility bills than they were just a year ago. In that same poll, a majority of people also claiming that tariffs hurt the economy, cause inflation, and harm their own family's situation, their financial situation. Yeah, I get it. Life ain't cheap. We all go to the grocery store. We all fuel up our vehicles. It's getting tougher. And shifting gears, some breaking news concerning law and order. The Las Vegas Metropolitan PD announcing plans to roll out a brand new fleet of bulletproof Tesla Cybertrucks, as marking the first large-scale deployment of electric vehicles for law enforcement here in the U.S. Hey, Producer Davey, if you can, try and score me one of those rigs so I'll feel safer kind of tooling around town in the News Roundup bulletproof Cybertruck. Can you work on that?
Oh, yeah, Bill, I'm on it.
Thank you very much, sir. Now over to politics. President Trump urgently doubling down and reiterating his call for Republicans to immediately eliminate the filibuster, warning that failure to do so could give a bunch of crazed Democrat lunatics, they're also called CDLs, the upper hand in next year's midterm elections. By the way, crazed Democrat lunatics, or CDLs, that is a copyrighted term by President Trump, 2025, all rights reserved, and so on. Sorry, David, that's legalese, the legal part. You don't mind, do you?
No, Bill, we got a good handle on that stuff, and I'm with you.
Very good. We're going to scooch on over now to the world of business and take a quick peek at a couple of stories making headlines today in finance, in trade, and more. Kicking things off, retail giant Walmart revealing that in order to boost morale and hold on to a bunch of their best employees, they're now paying some of their top managers more than $600,000 a year and handing over some lucrative shares of stock as well. Is that right? Is it 60 grand or 600 grand?
No, Bill, it's $620,000 a year.
Over 600 grand to manage a Walmart? I'm in the wrong business, man. All right, in a perfect world, Walmart managers make more than the president of the United States. I guess this is a perfect world. And moving along now, a bit of restaurant-related news to share with you. A group of investors buying up all the stock of well-known Denny's breakfast chain for $620 million and immediately announcing plans to take the entire organization private. Now, Denny's, I think I've heard of that one. Is that where you go and you put on the fake glasses and the big nose and you order the Rudy Fruity something or other breakfast? Is that right?
No, Bill. You get the Rudy Tooty fresh and fruity breakfast over at IHOP.
IHOP.
Denny's has the great Grand Slam breakfast.
Oh, I love me a Grand Slam. Outstanding. Also, another American favorite, Pizza Hut, reportedly could be up for sale in the very near future as well. Now, to pinch of breaking auto-related news here in the U.S., sales of electric vehicles throughout the country plummeting last month following the end of the $7,500 federal incentive program, with Ford, Kia, Hyundai, and Toyota all reporting massive declines in their monthly EV sales. You know, Davey, a funny thing happens when you stop paying people to buy EVs. You know what happens, Davey?
No, Bill. What happens?
They stop buying EVs. If you pay me to buy one, I'll buy one. You take away the bonus and the perks and all that. Also, you used to get a sticker in the EVs that let you drive in the carpool lane, at least in California. I think they're yanking that as well. There's no longer an incentive. All right, now time for a quick foray into the lighter side of news, and here's the skinny, as in the skinniest house in New York City. Yeah, the thinnest townhouse in Manhattan has just posted a for sale sign out in the front yard, and if you can squeeze through the doorway, you can make it your own full-time crib for just a skosh over $4 million ducats. Now, the legendary home, just over a century and a half old, nestled in the heart of the city's world-famous West Village neighborhood, and at its widest point, it measures about 9.5 feet from wall to wall, which might not be enough room to cram in a king-size waterbed. Also, a whole bunch of famous people have lived there in the past, including actor Cary Grant, John Barrymore as well, and anthropologist Margaret Mead. Never heard of her. The realtor selling the crib says the 1,000-square-foot home is was absolutely historic. That's terrific. There's nothing remotely like it on the market. Okay, and that basically it's a needle in a haystack kind of listing. It's kind of a great story, but a couple of thoughts. Now, Producer Davey, before I make an offer on the crib, first thing is I've got my 10-foot, it's a 10-foot grand piano. So to get it in, would I have to cut it in half or would I sell it and maybe buy an accordion?
Oh, no, Bill. I've heard you play the accordion. You'd be better off buying a tambourine.
I don't appreciate that. Second thing is, many of my friends are pro basketball players checking in at 7.5 feet tall. So technically, they might kind of fit in. But in my estimation, as a pretend real estate professional, I don't think they'd be too comfortable in that oversized shoebox. Oh, one last thing. I suppose I could buy this 9.5 foot wide palatial estate for over $4 million and charge it on the News Roundup Sears charge card. But any idea, Davey, where I'd put my pool table, my ping pong table, or my beautiful 80-inch big screen TV?
Yeah, Bill, you can always store them over at my place while you're trying to figure out what to do with them.
You're a team player. You're cutting out, but you're a team player. And now we do got to call it a wrap on the Tuesday edition of the Big News Roundup. And before we go, as we do each and every day right here on the program, we share with you a very notable quote. And these profound words today, they come to us from former Vice President Dick Cheney, who said, "It's easy to take liberty for granted when you've never had it taken from you." As we mentioned earlier, Cheney served our nation for decades. He lived an amazing life, and he'll be sorely missed by his family, friends, and colleagues throughout our country and throughout the entire world. All right, time for us to head on out. But before we go, don't forget the News Roundup motto: ask not what your podcast can do for you, ask what you can do for us, your podcast. For example, simply subscribe. Subscribe to the program so you never miss even a single episode. And now it does look like our time is officially up. Have an awesome day today. Please stay safe. I don't think it's too much to ask that we all continue to watch out for one another. And with that, we'll ask Jamie to fade the lights. Let's fade to black, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow afternoon.